Hi, I'm Sue Wilson.
I'm Tim Doherty.
And welcome to Sue and Tim and Conversations, or we haven't really come up with the name of this, but this is the first episode of Conversations with Sue and Tim, or Quarantine Conversations.
Quarantine Conversations. If it were the morning, we might call it Coffee Conversations. In the evening, just living room conversations. But
yeah, we thought we would just sit down and do what we've been doing during all this time spent at home, and that is talking. So, actually, a lot of what we've been doing has been watching our friends and our talented musician friends and even our talented radio friends doing things online.
A lot of people just not recording, but just broadcasting live, basically, on Facebook Live, playing instruments, singing, entertaining us all. People from Nashville, and also people from, locally right around here, right around our hometown.
And so we thought, gosh, what could we do? And then we thought, we don't have any talent like that. What kind of
talent do we have?
Our talent is
talking.
And the reason we say that our talent is talking is because both of us are career broadcasters. We have both been in the radio business for a lot of years. And I thought it would be nice if we started this conversation by giving you a little bit of our story, a little bit a background on us. And I think we should start with you.
Okay.
So you have been in the business for well over 30 years.
Yeah.
I have to say well over, but
that's what it is.
And so tell us a little bit about how you got started. I mean, what was your deal?
Growing up, listening to the radio, realizing how cool it would be to sit in a room by yourself, play records, because they were playing records then. You could talk on a microphone. You could be heard all across a city, but nobody has to see who you are.
So you kind of knew you wanted to do this.
Easily.
And so when you went to college, mm-hmm. and you
got a degree in Bachelor of Science in Communications, Ohio University.
Bachelor of Science makes it sound like you really have to know something.
Yeah, well, it's all in the name. But for the most part, I think my best learning was going to work at the college radio station right away. And so you did the same, didn't you?
Yeah. So you got your first job right out of radio.
Yeah.
I did too. I went to Kent State University. But we're talking about you right now. Because what is interesting about you is that you have spent the bulk of your career here in Ohio. And a lot of people move all over the place.
Yeah.
So you got your degree. You got your job at a couple different places. You worked at WBEA.
I was Elyria Lorraine Broadcasting. I worked in Athens, where I went to school for a while at an AM and FM operation down there. Came up to an FM operation in Elyria. Next thing I know, somebody heard me and they said, "Why don't you come to Akron?" And that was like in 1984, and I never left. Basically.
And you were from Cleveland. You grew up in the Parma area, and you grew up listening to MMS.
I did, yeah.
And then you had an opportunity to work at MMS for a little while,
short period of time, weekend guy for a couple of years.
But the bulk of your career has been spent at a rock station, WONE in Akron, 97.5. You've been there 30 years. You've been nicknamed Tim Doherty, the Rock and Roll Authority, because you've been there for so long. Mm-hmm. But you don't just have a TV or radio background. You have a TV background.
There was a time where, with some ownership changes that occurred with WONE back in 1987, that radio was separating away from TV, which was a combo at the time. And I got asked to stay on with Channel 23, so they asked me if I could do the weather. I had very little experience, if any, on TV or with weather. But I kind of faked it for about 7 years. I did learn a lot.
You faked it for 7 years. Yeah. Actually, that's how I got to know Tim Doherty. He's very modest because he was the TV weatherman. So I got to know you or know who you were because I literally would be at home and you were on the 6 o'clock, 11 o'clock news. And then on top of that, you were on the radio. And for a while, you did both. Yeah. And so anyway, and then eventually you left the radio, but the television station was the ABC affiliate, which is pretty cool. Mm-hmm. So you had 7 years as a weatherman, and some of your bits were very funny. We have some reels we'd like to show someday.
Actually, David Letterman was kind of an inspiration to me because he was the same thing. He'd gone to a Mid-American Conference school. He had done some radio. He ended up as a TV weatherman, and he was just goofy. It was just a job, and he just brought a little lightheartedness to it. And I really liked that. I don't think I will never say I'm as clever as Dave, but
he was an inspiration to a lot of radio people.
Indeed.
I used to work with Trapper Jack in Cleveland, and he had a David Letterman-esque style, and he too said that David Letterman was a big influence on him.
Speaking of that, talking about you now.
Well, gosh.
You went to Kent State.
Yeah, I went to Kent
State. You
State.
grew up in Akron.
Very similar. You and I have kind of a similar history. And unlike a lot of people, you and I didn't chase radio jobs and move all over the country. I went to school locally. I grew up in the Akron area. I spent most of my career in Cleveland area. I always say I grew up in Akron and became a grown-up in Cleveland because I moved and got my first, second real radio job. My first radio job after graduating Kent State and a little station in Sandusky was in Akron at WKDD. Mm-hmm. And a guy named Nick Anthony, the program director there, hired me and was my very first mentor. And when I first started, I wasn't a great air talent. I mean, that's what I thought I wanted to be. I, like you, grew up listening to radio, and all my music discovery was radio. And, wouldn't it be cool to be able to play all these songs on the radio? But once I started being a DJ, I don't know, I wasn't great at it. And I got a little bored, but I just talking on the radio, but I was super interested in how are these records getting on the air? Like, how does the program director choose? And I thought the DJs used to get to choose, and that was in the way early days, but actually the DJ played whatever the format was that the program director laid out. So I went in and asked Nick Anthony, hey, I noticed last weekend when I was on the air, this song was on, and now it's playing a lot more a week later. How do you make that decision to add records and move them around on the station? And he said,
it's all about research.
Yeah.
It's all about just, finding out what the people who are listening, the people who listen to you guys all the time, what they really like and what, is new that they're interested in, that's then bubbles up to being a big hit. And the stuff that all right, we've heard enough of that. Why don't you stop playing that so much?
But I said, what about research? I mean, how do you find out? And he said, well, we have a research department. He ended up hiring me full-time from the weekend shift that I did and the fill-ins and stuff into the research department. And he really taught me a lot about programming. And we, found out what our core listener wanted. We determined what audience the station was trying to reach. And at that time, it was a leaning female audience of 18 to 34, and so we researched the songs to them and asked them, do you like these? Do you not like? Are you sick of them? And that's all that I found so fascinating, and I decided I wanted to go into programming.
So that's when you pulled yourself away a little bit more from the air, got off the air, and became a music person, but then also a talent coach. Because eventually you were given a programming job in Cleveland, correct?
Yeah, I got my first programming job in Cleveland in the late 80s at WDOK. We changed the format from elevator music to soft AC, soft rock. And I programmed there for 12 years. And I got to work with some superstars, and Trapper Jack being one of them, and many other tremendous talent. And then
a gentleman by the name of Bill Randall,
who
way back in the day actually was the first to bring Elvis Presley up north to play at a high school in Cleveland.
Yeah,
that's the story.
He was on our AM station. I eventually got responsibility over the music of your life, AM 850 WRMR. So I was able to work with and we worked with 3WE, now TAM. So I got to learn a great deal about news talk programming and sports talk programming and we carried Browns games. And so it was all just a wonderful, fascinating experience. And then I met Mike McVeigh. We ended up having him be our consultant, and he turned into another mentor for me. So I programmed there for 12 years. Then I left and joined McVeigh Media. Mm-hmm. Then I worked at The Fish. We launched.
You were kind of out of radio for a little while. You were with Mike McVeigh.
I was a programming consultant.
You weren't even in the building. You were kind of working out of home.
Yeah, I was working.
Programming consultant.
Right, and I got the opportunity to work with stations all over the country and the Jim Brickman radio show. And then I was lured back to radio programming again when we launched The Fish in Cleveland. And I was there for 5 years. And I got to work with Robin Swoboda and all these wonderful, talented people there. So, and then...
Yeah, the story about Robin Swoboda is pretty funny. About how Robin Swoboda is this huge Cleveland TV icon. She was away from TV and you get a phone call from her?
She said she loved what we were doing on The Fish. And she loved that her kids could listen to the radio station. And gosh, could she find a way to do anything with this at all? And I said, would you like to work? You mean you'd like to work here? And she said, well, gosh, I'd love to. Maybe we could talk. And so I got off the phone with her and went sprinting down the hall to my general manager and said, Robin Swoboda is interested in working with us.
And is it true that she didn't have a lot of radio experience?
She didn't.
On camera?
Yeah, I think real early in her career she started in radio and did something and some stories she told. But her whole career was television. But she's such a natural. I learned more about how to be a talent and a natural talent. And when eventually I got the phone call from Nick Anthony again, back to the beginning, full circle, he calls me and asks me if I wanted to program and work down at WQMX, program his country station. I took the things I learned from Robin Swoboda when I ended up on the air again, full circle, during a morning show, which I did for 8 years.
And was that going to be full time? Not full time, but that was like you were in between hosts at that time.
Yeah,
you stepped in when somebody left.
Right, when I got to QMX,
it was going to be interim job.
We had a morning team. The girl left after about a year, and I stepped into the morning show temporarily. And then Scott and I really hit it off, and we really had great on-air chemistry. And I remained on the air for 8 years doing the morning show.
Meanwhile, I was down the hall at that time doing mornings on WONE. Was of the many shifts that I've done, mornings I think was probably the longest. I was on for 10 years.
Yes.
I've been with O&E for so long, basically, that I've done each shift a couple of times now. But mornings lasted me a good 10 years when I wasn't just filling in. I was like the main guy. So 2 doors down, in between us was WAKR, the legend. Here's Scott and Sue down the hall, and I'd met you in 2006. And tell your story a little bit about it, because we both have had some tragedy in our lives.
Yeah, well, I was married to a wonderful, also radio guy. My late husband, Phil Portal, worked in radio, and I had 2 beautiful daughters. And during the time I was working at the Fish in Cleveland, Phil was diagnosed with cancer. He fought a short, valiant battle and died just about a year after diagnosis. So by the time I got to the radio station in Akron, when I was offered the job and left the Fish and came down to Akron to program WQMX, I knew and met Tim, and I was aware that Tim's wife had been sick, and she had been battling cancer for a very long time. And shortly thereafter, a year or two, your wife, Donna, passed away. So Tim and I got to be friends. We were co-workers first. It was a very organic friendship that we had this commonality. Would go to lunch. I'd say, hey, I walked in your shoes. Maybe, do you need to talk? And we just got to be really good friends with that common sad thing. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of a sad story that ended up turning into a wonderful, happy love story, because eventually we started hanging out, and we started hanging out, and then one day, there was some stuff in between, but we were hanging out for a while. But then one day, I decided to walk in on her morning show on Valentine's Day 2013 and surprise her with a proposal on the air. Just as proposed to me on the air on Valentine's Day.
Their day long, well, I shouldn't say, their morning long, getting the phone calls from people wishing each other a happy Valentine's Day. She was basically done with that, because it was almost time to let's wrap the show up. And I come walking in on the phone.
He was so nervous.
That was probably the worst, not the worst, but the scariest thing I've ever done in radio.
It's the worst thing he's ever
walk in on somebody's show and propose live on air, because I weren't sure how you would take it. Like, this is lovely, but why did you do it in such a public manner? What if I decided I'm not ready? I didn't think you'd say no, but you could have said yes on the air to make it cute, and then my office right now.
It's funny when you're our age, a little bit older, and you start dating, and we had been dating a couple of years and talked about getting married and knew we wanted to be together. But, it was like, at our age, do we get married? So actually the proposal, while we talked about it, it was a surprise. It was a beautiful surprise. And so
she said yes. It took her about 8 seconds.
That's because I was like, And
I think your morning show partner, Scott
was
so what's the answer? What are you going to say? Oh, yes. Haven't I said yes?
But anyway, so that's our story. And we wanted to give you a little bit of background as to how we're these 2 radio people, and all we really know how to do is talk and super appreciate really great music. And both of us got into the business because we love music.
Can't play a note of anything, but we certainly
can play it on the radio.
Yeah, we'll play it on the radio.
So, that's kind of what we thought. Well, we sit and talk all the time about music. We sit and listen to different things. When we go to our dear friend Susan, who owns Regency Wine Store, in which we want you to support she's still open for wine sales and retail sales. We do a thing there and we will do it again once everything opens back up, called Wine and Vinyl. So again, we do a lot of stuff together. We MC a lot of stuff together. We do these shows. We do Wine and Vinyl, and our daughters and son and all our kids have said, you guys ought to do a show together. You guys ought to do a podcast together. So I think what we're doing is a vodcast.
If you don't mind how we look, we will certainly chat about just about anything, because that's one kind of a benchmark, I think, of people on the air. You have to be kind of a master of, or a jack of all trades, master of none, or a Jill of all trades, master of none. Be able to talk about just about anything, to try to keep up with whatever that might be thrown your way.
Well, and I don't know, I let that slip right by you. You notice I said vodcast, not podcast.
Yeah.
So we could do a podcast, certainly. But the fact that we decided to put our conversation on video, I don't know, is vodcast a real word?
I think so. Yeah.
It is?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, it is now. Maybe it's ours. Maybe we should surface market.
That.
And surf. But anyway, I'd like to, the kids have said you should do something together. And to tell you the truth, Tim, I would love to do a radio show with you.
It would be fun. We've done a couple, well, we've had an occasion or two to be together on the air.
Yeah, only when Scott got really sick and I called you and said, Scott is never sick, but he's sick. Could you come in and do the show with me?
There was a New Year's Eve on WNE where you and I did something.
A couple lines here and there.
Yeah.
But like 2 shows.
Yeah.
So we've been together, married almost 5 years. It'll be 5 years this year. And together about 9.
Mm-hmm.
And both in the radio business. Both same company, different stations. But we've never done a show. So I don't know if we ever will. This might be the closest we ever get. Unless someone, decides
sees this and turns us
says,
into big
oh
stars.
Oh my gosh.
Where have those two been all my life?
Yeah.
40 years in Akron.
So, all right, now that we got that, this episode 1, if there's ever an episode 2 or an episode, we don't know if there will ever be another vodcast again. But now that we've gotten past this is who we are and this is our story, let's talk about kind of the stuff we talk about in our living room and at our coffee table conversations and our couch conversations. And obviously that's all this pandemic stuff. Yeah. Now I read...
Well, we're all inside on lockdown, trying to get out occasionally to a grocery store with gloves and masks, walking the dog around our neighborhood. Now when we see somebody else coming our way, we all kind of separate. We nod like we're trying to keep our assured clear distance of each and every one. So we're all sort of in lockdown right now.
Yeah, well, drinking a little bit of wine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, speaking of which... Mm-hmm. Here's one that we'll just go ahead and say that we got today from Susan.
Regency Wine Cellars.
Montenevoso it's a delicious wine.
So this is an Italian. We love Italian wines. We like the big, bold Italian wines. And I'm always on search for an inexpensive wine. Because one thing, I'm no wine connoisseur. I know what I like. But one thing that is great is when you find something that wasn't very expensive. So I think of expensive wines as like over $30. So sometimes if we can find one for 20, okay, but if they're over if they're under 15, it's
you're
really
skeptical.
A deal. Yeah. But you think, this was $6.99 and it's really nice. It's very smooth. It's real full. It tastes like a big Italian wine. It's just a table wine.
It's a nice little red blend Italian
but
table
it's not,
wine. Cheers.
Cheers. It's not too fruity. But you can taste the fruit.
It's very good.
I never know how to describe, smoky, fruity, fruit forward. I don't know. Yeah. It's really tasty. $6.99. So anyway, I read an article this morning that I wanted to talk over. I asked you to read it because, so we could chat about it. A guy named Julio Gambuto, and I'm kind of looking at my notes. He talked about, and I posted this, and when we post this vodcast, I can put this link to the article in the notes. He thinks that there's going to be, in the getting back to normal and getting back to work time, there's going to be some powerful forces in advertising that's going to really be selling us on how to get back together or get back to
reminding us what things used to be like.
And he says don't fall for it. Don't fall for all the advertising that's going to make you believe things were so great. You need to buy all this. You need to do all this. You won't be happy unless you, and maybe not. That we should grab on to some of the lessons that we learned in the pandemic. And there was a lot of stuff in there. I thought it was really great and really well put together. And some was positive and some was negative. But the positive that I want to focus on, the positive I got back is that, you know, a lot of messaging is going to talk about getting back to normal. But what does back to normal mean? And how about a better normal? That there could be a new normal and it could be better. So, Tim, there's this quote. Do you want to read this?
I can read this. The quote from the article, it says, "Take a deep breath, ignore the deafening noise, and think deeply about what you want to put back into your life. Because this is our chance to define a new version of normal, a rare and truly sacred, yes, sacred opportunity to get rid of the BS and to only bring back what works for us, what makes our lives richer, what makes our kids happier, and what makes us truly proud. We get to Marie Kondo the shit out of all of it. We care deeply about get rid of the clutter. We care deeply about one another. That is clear, and that can be seen in every supportive Facebook post, and every meal dropped off for a neighbor, and in every Zoom birthday party. We are good people, and as good people, we want to define our own terms, what this country looks like in 5, 10, or even 50 years. This is our chance to do that. The biggest one we have ever gotten, and the best one we will ever get."
And, you know, I just think that it's really appropriate that we're talking about this on the Saturday night before Easter. I mean, tomorrow's Easter Sunday, whatever your faith base, whether you have a belief system or not. Easter is about renewal and rebirth. And, you know, I feel like this could have been God's way of saying, you all need to take a big time out and think about your behavior.
Go to your rooms, big time out,
and sit and think about this. And then, you know, stop all the fighting and the divisiveness and think of, you know, the greed, and just take care of each other. And we have been forced to do that.
Yeah.
We have been forced.
And when you think about it too, and this is probably what's going to rankle some people, in that because we're all not working, which is bad, because obviously there's a lot of people hurting because they're not on the job, factories are not producing, so forth and so on.
Retail, everything.
But the upside of it is what's happening in nature, because it seemingly is like a cleansing is beginning to happen across the globe. What are some of the examples?
Oh, well, I read something that in India, the cities, there's been so much pollution over the years that there's a resident who said from the city, I'm not sure which city, whether it was Delhi or, but that you can see the Himalayas from the city for the first time in over 30 years.
There's been a break.
In LA, in you know, you've heard the stories about dolphins in the canals and Venice and
the cleanliness of Lake Michigan now.
Yeah.
How you're able to actually see a little bit further down now in some of our Great Lakes because of the pollution has subsided somewhat. And
I guess everything somehow takes a political lean, but you don't have to be left or right to care about pollution. I mean, we're not naive. We have to get back to work, and we have to get back to producing things. But what if this got us to think about how can we get back to work and just be a little more sustainable and take care, you know, of the pollutants, you know, in our air and in our water, and just be more mindful of everything. And so, the water being clean, and you know. So I guess what I wanted to ask you was what, other than the pollution, that's a good one, what would you like the new normal to be in a good way? Like, what have you learned, or what can we all learn from this pandemic that's good?
Well, not just the first thought was washing hands, which we should always do, but maybe just being more mindful of personal hygiene, because, you know, you come to realize how quickly that spread because maybe people weren't as hygienic as they could have been.
It's so true. When one of my pet peeves is when you walk into a bathroom and it says in a restaurant, employees must wash their hands before returning to work. And I want to take a Sharpie and write, everyone should wash their hands before you walk out of this bathroom. Wash your hands. And so, forget just this coronavirus. Cold season, flu season, people would be so much healthier if we practiced these things.
Yeah.
In the Middle East, they wear masks a lot because they've dealt with a lot of coronaviruses. They've dealt with SARS and MERS, and they've been wearing masks for years.
Yeah.
Should we wear masks more?
And perhaps, and this is probably heading toward the political, but the planning of now realizing how quickly we could be at the mercy of something like this.
Yeah.
Where everybody's affected, and being a couple that have a nurse in the family to realize that, these people on the front lines really are fighting a battle that came on us fast.
Yeah.
So, and obviously they're doing so without a lot of people without the proper, PPEs, the personal protective equipment. So something there too.
Well, and you know what I've really appreciated? Look at what's essential and what's not essential. So many of us think what we do is so important, and you stop and go, the jobs that may not have the showbiz as the white collar jobs and the jobs that get to work from home, but the people who are delivering all this, the carry out that we're ordering, the people who are working at the grocery stores. I mean, we've been talking about that. We've been seeing it on the news. We know that the heroes are the medical personnel, like you said, our daughter, your daughter, Jenna, who's a nurse, and all of them on the front lines, but also people stuck in the grocery stores and truck drivers and just people who are still working.
Public transportation drivers.
Yeah. So that we can stay safe. And a lot of them are making minimum wage, and a lot of them aren't making enough. So minimum wage I'd like to see to go up maybe. And again, I don't want this to be political, but...
And something we saw the other day, because it's very good. John Krasinski from The Office is doing something from his own home now. Some good news.
Oh, it's so good.
It's very good.
Watch it. We'll put a link to that.
Episode 3 is ready to go, so we should watch that later. But he was talking about the people who now, with kids home, some of whom are going to be their school year is now ended, parents who are trying to work from home as they have to, but also teach their students, their kids, and realizing how important teachers are.
And how poorly paid they are as compared to...
He made a joke about how I think teachers should be paid $1.7 million every day. So, because it's not easy to teach your kids at home. People who do homeschooling, I can't imagine that.
And we're all saying, oh, isn't it wonderful that we're staying home because we're doing puzzles together and cooking and appreciating and taking that time out I talked about earlier. But come on, let's get real. This is rough on parents. We're at a different stage of our lives. We're empty nesters. But,
we have a dog and a cat. That's we walk them, we feed them. It's basically all we have to do.
But we have so many, including our daughter with and our grandchildren, and so many of my nieces and nephews that have young kids, and all of a sudden they're turning into teachers and they're trying to work from home, and it's really a stressful time. So while we're saying there's all this good stuff, and we do want to slow down, and we appreciate family meals and all this time, we also got to appreciate that it is tough on people. How do you feel about when we slowly get back into it? And I think it does have to be gradual. I don't think all of a sudden it's going to be everything's open. I mean, those first few times you go out and you go to a restaurant, is there going to be like, we're sitting too close?
Oh, I'm sure.
How are you going to feel?
Well, that's a good point. I mean, we're always. I think from now on we're going to be mindful of that, of being like sitting too close. Sometimes restaurants put you like right next to somebody. We're all going to be thinking, am I too close to this person? So it might feel strange.
What about menus?
Menus, yeah.
I've been saying,
we talked about this.
Yeah, menus get handed to you, and you look at them. If you got a cold, maybe the person in front of you was like, touching their face, which it seems like my only hobby is touching my face because
as I am right now, I keep itching my eyes.
And drinking wine is like all these things that you say we've been doing a lot of, but yeah, everything needs to be sanitized in a restaurant. And I never thought about a menu. I mean, do they really take them and wipe them off and then hand them to the next person? Salt and pepper shakers.
Which, by the way, we talked about this same topic with our son-in-law Matt, and he said that when he was a younger guy, he worked at a restaurant, and he said, we always wipe down the menu. So that's good. So if that's a practice, thank you. That's a great practice.
Yeah, but I've thought a lot about that. But one of our friends, when we were talking about this, talked about salt and pepper shakers at like a rib place.
Oh, yeah.
And, when you're licking your hands.
Licking the sauce off your fingers.
And then you grab the ketchup and add more hot sauce, or you grab... Anyway, so, I mean, here's what I'd like to see a lot more of and what I'd like to stick with, and that is, like, I can't wait to go to shows again and see live music. But I have had such an appreciation for acoustic sets. I mean, I like acoustic music anyway, but to see all these artists, the big famous ones doing shows from home, and then all our local musician friends just sit and play their guitars, I feel like there's probably a lot of art and creation going on now, that these songs are then going to be turned into songs that are going to be on the radio and in concerts for years to come, songs that were inspired by this time. And it'll be a whole like peace, love, understanding kind of vibe, I hope, that'll come out of the music.
And part of our career is always, some of the perks have been to go to the big shows, which is another reason why you and or I probably got into this, to like, get to go backstage and do all that and be at a crowd of blossom of 20,000 people. But as we've gotten a little bit older, those are great experiences, but I think even greater are going to see some of our friends with just a guitar and just a speaker and playing some of their stuff acoustically.
Small venues, I really appreciate.
We like that. We appreciate
and I
that.
think it might take me a little while before I'm super comfortable in a giant crowd, but I was feeling that way as I got older anyway. The older I get, I don't know, how I feel about stadium concerts, just because it's a hassle, the parking and all that stuff. But after this, I'm going to look forward, I think, to a full production show. I've been enjoying all the acoustic sets. But, and another thing that I hope sticks with us is being outside. I mean, we are seeing people just walking dogs, walking down the street, walking everywhere. I've never seen Akron so full of walkers. It's not a walking
people
city.
On bicycles, people jogging, people walking dogs,
And the weather's not been great. I mean, we've had a pocket day here and there of 70, and then the next day it snows. But people are even getting out in weather that's not great, because that's all we have to do is walk outside. That's all we're allowed to do.
Bundle up and head out.
And I'm trying to think of some of the other things that, I think what that article got me thinking about is it's okay to leave behind the stuff that wasn't working. And as he said, Marie Kondo, who's like, clear everything that doesn't bring you joy. We can Marie Kondo all the crap that didn't work. And while I am anxious to get back to seeing people, and I've appreciated that, I want to make sure I see people that are important to me in person more often. I also I feel like I've learned to appreciate being in and being more mindful of things and finding ways to entertain ourselves.
Finding quiet places and realizing that a quiet place is a good thing to do, to resort to when you want to. And now we will be pretty well versed at that because we'll know how to do that. Also, I think another thing we might learn is like what our parents who grew up during the Depression era, when that was forced on them, when money was very tight, your folks perhaps, I know mine were, my mom was very, I won't say tight in a bad way, but she didn't want to spend money needlessly. She waited till she could afford, when my brother and I would tell her, why don't you get whole house air conditioning? Oh, that's expensive. I have to save for that. So
until you could pay cash.
Yeah, they learned how to save because they'd been through a period of time like the Depression. They learned how to pay cash and save for something and not just put it on credit. So maybe we've gotten away from that a little bit. Maybe this time will teach us about things like personal space and hygiene, and how quickly we could all be stuck inside because some pandemic has swept the globe. I
mean, I feel like this is once in a century thing, but I don't know. Maybe it's not. Maybe they could come more fast and furious now. But yeah, I agree with you about the spending money. I mean, we have had to say everything's been cut back. We just don't know completely what's going to happen in the next months. So the $6.99 bottle of wines are awesome.
I guess that is the scary part. We don't know what. I mean, it's like, well, kids might in Ohio go back to school in May. Maybe
they might not. Yeah.
And maybe by June we'll all think, well, okay, let's get back to normal. Maybe it might not be June. It might be August. We don't know when. So that's the scary part.
The frugality. I hope we can stick with some of that. And They've been valuable, painful lessons, but I always thought you never learn a whole lot from your successes. You learn more from your failures and your rough times and how to get through. And the example of the depression, I know, I mean, this stinks. There's no way around, businesses closing and all this stuff.
16 million people out of work.
Of course, that's awful. But I also don't want to risk lives. I mean, so it really is a challenge to know. I think we just have to trust and listen to those people. Nothing we can do about it anyway. They're going to tell us whether we agree or not. But I'm trying to do our best to enjoy the downtime. And, if I have to be quarantining with anyone, I'm glad I'm spending this time with you.
Kiss first. Cheers.
Cheers. Thanks for our first conversation with Sue and Tim. And hopefully we'll do a second one. Good night.